To my clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started with our third virtual Make It Monday forum for the Anchorage Chamber. As a reminder, my name is Bruce Bustamante. I'm the president and CEO of the Anchorage Chamber. I want to welcome everyone for joining us today. A couple of housekeeping items before I go through introductions. Number one, we'd ask that you turn your video cameras off. That way we keep the focus on our panel of speakers today. We always find that's kind of the best best process to have in place. Next, I'd like to again thank Alaska 529 and our friends there, including Tito Munoz. Great way to save for education for your children, and you know, it's a save in Alaska and study anywhere is their motto. So again, our quarterly sponsor. They've been very gracious in transitioning their sponsorship to our virtual program. So again, thank you to Alaska 529. Before I go into the bios and introductions of our three main speakers, I would like to introduce our member of the month or new member presentation, and that is Jen Matoya of Blitz Promotions. And Blitz Promotions offers event planning, business and political solving, product launch support, marketing, and social planning with 15 years of experience in Anchorage. So, you know, welcome to Jen, and I'll turn the program over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Bruce, and everyone for joining us. I'm Jen Motika with Blitz Promotions, and I want to start your Monday with a little story about how I ended up at the Chamber. So let me share my screen here. So 15 years ago, I made the journey to Alaska. I followed an Alaskan boy who is now an Alaskan man up here. And my second day in Anchorage, my mother-in-law was working at the radio station. She said, "Hey, why don't you come do this telethon with me for St. Jude? I'll introduce you to a bunch of people, and hopefully someone can find you a job." So that was my first day in Anchorage, and what an amazing day. I met a woman who said, "Hey, I think my ex-husband might be hiring. Maybe he could get you a job." And that first job at Channel 13 as an ad exec for the TV station really set the course for my entire life here in Anchorage. Just that idea of caring for others and willing to help a stranger really set the tone and introduced me to this first slide, the Eva Foundation. I spent several years with them, and it was an amazing group of women and men who were helping survivors of abuse to rebuild their lives. You know, following after a wake, what do these people do? So we kind of helped. We saw a problem, and this was our solution, was to create this foundation. So I worked with them for a few years. And then another kind of moment in my life was I had all these small businesses that I was seeing who couldn't quite maybe afford brick and mortar space, right? They're very small, a lot of online businesses, home-based businesses. So I started the sip and shops. And if you've heard the term sip and shop, it's everywhere now. I kid you not, within 1 week of me starting to advertise mine, they were everywhere, which of course is flattering. But they were launched as fundraisers and small vendor events to help find resale space for local small businesses. So after doing that for a few years, I also realized that a lot of these women and men in small businesses didn't necessarily have the big training as far as leadership goes. So I started these home-based business conferences, small business conferences that kind of grew into leadership and empowerment moments. And so we've done a couple of those, and they've been great. My other side gig with my home-based business, I train 150 women around the country. So I'm pretty familiar with Zoom and virtual trainings. And then another step forward was my most recent contract with the Anchorage Public Library. So this small little idea business of finding a solution for this problem that existed with small businesses kind of grew into, how can I help my community? And the Anchorage Library, if you haven't been recently, they completely remodeled their space. It looks amazing. And they've opened up a couple areas for events. and they didn't really have anyone that could promote that. So Misty over at the library knew me through, it's a small town, and we got talking, and I was able to pull in a bunch of tours, book a bunch of events for their spaces. And so it really got me thinking, what else can I do to continue to help other businesses in the community? I have expanded into some political, which is a fairly new arena, but a very interesting one, as well as product launches. I've launched a couple products. So my next step in all of this and going through kind of this pandemic has really been, what opportunity lies out there? And obviously the Chamber is an amazing space for any business to connect and network with others. So that's a little bit about me. If you have any needs in the political planning, fundraising, business, consulting, product launching, learning how to Zoom maybe a little, or anything else, my information is right there. My email, please take a snapshot, write it down, and email me, and we can connect for a virtual coffee. I do have a couple spaces left in the next couple weeks, and room for maybe 3 or 4 more clients this year. So let's chat, and I hope to meet you all very soon. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Jen, and congratulations for being in business for 15 years now, and obviously very successful. And so it's tremendous learning about your company, and we all could use a little help with Zoom. Just talking about that.
Yes, please reach out.
Oh boy, yes, a great invitation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To move into our program, I'm going to introduce our 3 speakers and then turn it over to them. First, joining us from TOTE Maritime is Alex Hofeling, and he serves as the Regional Sales Manager and Director of Marketing here in Alaska. And he has worked, actually, he was with the Coast Guard for a number of years before going to work for TOTE. He holds an undergraduate degree in business administration from the University of Washington, and it was cut off, but I assume it's an MBA from Seattle University. He's been in Alaska for just a few years now, and also he served on the, I believe it was it was the Transportation Club, of Tacoma while he was in the Pacific Northwest. So we're real happy to have him here in Alaska with us. And also joining us is Val Dreyfus. He's Senior Vice President of Matson, Inc., Alaska. And Val has led Matson's Alaska operation since 2019. And he's currently Senior Vice President of Alaska, and he oversees the aspects of Matson's core marketing operations in Alaska. Val is originally from San Francisco and has held a wide range of positions in the maritime industry. And prior to joining Matson, he had worked for Sealand for 6 years. Val holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Business and Economics from the University of San Francisco and is a graduate of the UCLA Executive Program. He served on many boards in the industry, and he currently serves as co-chair of the Port of Alaska Users Group and is a member of the board of directors of the Marine Exchange of Alaska, Special Olympics Alaska, Covenant House Alaska, and is a member of the Investors Council of the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. So certainly in his short amount of time here has gotten very involved in the community. And next is a man who needs no introduction. He's been a part of our programs for the last few years, keeping us up to date. He works with us on the board of directors and keeping us updated on the progress with the Port of Alaska. Oh, and I might also add that Val Dreyfus was just added to the Anchorage Chamber Board of Directors. So congratulations there. And we're real happy to have him. But Steve, he's in charge of the port day-to-day operations. He's been a port director since 2014. He was previously named deputy port director in 2007 after retiring as a colonel after 30 years of active duty in the U.S. Air Force. He is an accredited Marine Port Executive and member of the International Association of Maritime and Port Executives Advisory Board. He also serves on University of Alaska Anchorage Global Supply Chain Management Curriculum Advisory Committee. Boy, there's a mouthful. And is chairman of the, yes it is, and is chairman of the Cook Inlet Harbor Safety Committee. Before I turn the program over to Steve, who I understand will be the first speaker, I wanted to thank the gentlemen for their service too. We've got a Coast Guard person and an Air Force person as well. So thank you so much for your duties to our country. And I will turn it over now to Steve.
Okay, thanks very much. And I hope everybody can hear me. I'm more looking forward to the Q&A that comes after this, but let me go ahead and start with the 50,000 foot view of all things down here at the port. And I've mentioned this to a few folks over the course of the last few weeks, that when you're looking at how the port has been operating and surviving in this new environment, you know, if my home was down here on the port and I looked out my window every day, it would be very difficult for me to even comprehend what was going on out in the real world. Because fortunately for everyone who is a benefactor of the supply chain here to Alaska, as I look out the window and look at port operations, there is relatively nothing going on to indicate to me that there's a problem out there. And we pride ourselves in making sure that as this, you know, as important as the supply chain is to the state of Alaska, and to the folks who benefit directly from this port, that we keep it operating as best we can under these circumstances. And as the landlord of the facility, we are not the folks, the 25 municipal employees that manage the place as a city department on behalf of the municipality. You know, we are not the conductors of commerce, but we can certainly be a big problem for those of our tenants that do, and you're going to listen to two of them here shortly. If we can't provide to them a facility that is safe to use and available when they need it to operate. So our responsibilities in this unusual environment is to make sure that the port stays open, the lights stay on, the roads are safe to drive, and the facility is safe to use. And I think so far we've been successful in accomplishing that task. We do have a responsibility, though, to protect our small workforce. So we've done about, I think, what everybody else has been doing with respect to those folks who can work from home are being allowed to work from home. I think the little aside that comes out of this is there's a lot of folks that are members of this particular chamber that are going to probably find themselves reevaluating just how much brick and mortar they're really going to need when this is all over. But we've got a small staff, and about half of them are working from home. Those of us that feel that it's important to be readily available down here for the workforce of the tenants who may need our assistance sooner rather than later are still working from the office. Purely by happenstance, the port offices are arranged so that we can be physically distant from each other yet still go to work every day. Most of us have an office that you can close the door on, and the folks who have desks on the floor are every day 15 to 20 feet from each other. So we've got, we've satisfied the requirements that we would need to be able to stay in business if we were all here, without having to do anything architecturally to the facility to make it so. So we've got that in place. The people that deal directly with most of the port users every day are our security guys, and not only has their company put some mandates on them for how to prepare to deal with the public, but they have also embraced all of the direction that's come out of the city's emergency operations center and the incident command structure that we put in place for the whole municipality. And it's been quite a cooperative effort, and I think we are surviving there. We deal with the Coast Guard on a fairly regular basis with respect to ships coming and going and issues that we may have to deal with respect to them. One of the processes that we've put in place with the Coast Guard's approval is when ships come from overseas destinations, there's a requirement for something called a declaration of security. It's a document that usually is handled by as soon as the ship is tied alongside and there's a gangway in place, our security people go on board and meet with the ship's security force and do the paperwork. We asked for permission to do that via email before ships arrive, and we got permission to do that. So for the better part of 2.5 months, that's been the process here, and I suspect this process will survive getting back to normal. and because it just makes good sense, and not having that face-to-face to conduct this hasn't done anything adverse to the process. So here's a positive benefit of all that's been going on here. I also talk on the phone weekly with my counterpart down at the Northwest Seaport Alliance, Mr. John Wolf. He's the president and CEO of the Northwest Seaport Alliance, of which the Port of Tacoma is a member. They are the other end of the supply chain. We maintain constant communications with each other. John tells me, well, how's the health of things in the Seattle area? And we talk about issues up here. So we keep those lines of communication open. I mean, it's refreshing to have that kind of a close working relationship with your friends at the other end of your supply chain. More of a challenge if you're receiving shipping from Rotterdam or Shanghai, like our big brothers on the East and West Coast are. But in this little world up here, we have an opportunity to maintain that close communication, and we're exploiting the living daylights out of it. So, and I think that's to the benefit of everybody. So with that, I'm going to stop and turn the discussion over to the experts that are really doing all the heavy lifting.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. What a great update and a great presentation. So I guess it's up to Val or Alex. Who wants to go next?
Well, I'll be happy to go. So thank you, Bruce and Tasha, for inviting us to this forum. I think the first thing is, our industry was considered an essential business when COVID-19 started, which was surprisingly, we're into May and we won't go back to March. So when this first started, we set up as two primary goals as a company. The first goal was the safety and health of our employees, and that has been accomplished, which we're very pleased about. The second goal was to continue to operate our services, and I'm also pleased to say that that was accomplished. We recognize our responsibility as the lifeline to Alaska, as we serve as a lifeline in many other communities like Hawaii, like Guam, how important it is that we do that. So we have been, from the beginning, as Steve had said, if you looked out his window, things are normal. We continue to come to Anchorage. Well, we sail out of Tacoma twice every week. We get to Anchorage twice every week. We go on to Kodiak twice a week, and we go to Dutch weekly. So those services have been uninterrupted. And that's really a tribute, not just to Matson, but the entire supply chain, the labor unions that work the ships and are on board the ships, the sailors, the customers that make sure that the supplies are loaded into those beautiful containers so we can put them on our ship and get them into the market. So I think it's a real testament to all the people involved, including, as we all recognize now, the truck drivers and the people in the stores that are serving as that food or selling those products to us. So I guess the next question is, what did we do to ensure the safety of our employees? Well, the first thing was very closely monitor the CDC directions, all the directions from the from the Coast Guard, local authorities, the federal government, international authorities, to make sure that we're properly following those guidelines, which we've done. And some of the initial things we did, as Steve had said, I think pretty much everyone's doing them, but first thing was to maximize the number of people working from home, just to avoid the contact in the office. Cleaning, disinfecting the offices, the terminal equipment, the vessel quarters to protect our crew members, which is critical. Obviously, they need to be healthy in order to sail those ships and get them here. Other things, we changed our processes for receiving and delivery of automobiles. Again, the goal was to avoid contact, avoid the exchange of money between our customers and our people. And also the same thing on containers. What processes could we deploy to avoid the interaction between truck drivers and terminals and the paperwork? So all that has been done, I think, very well, and with great cooperation between all the parties involved. And then lastly, and Steve touched on this with his communications with the port, of Northwest Port Alliance, our communications internally have increased dramatically because of the changing environment. So everywhere from daily meetings with teams, meetings 2, 3, 4 times a week with teams throughout our organization, as well as a weekly town hall meeting that we do once a week now with our chairman and CEO. And it's just so important that everybody is aware and up to speed with what's going on. So that's been what we've done. Now, the last thing I'd talk about is our community support. We operate with 3 foundations. We call them Matson Giving. In 2019, we gave $3.7 million in cash and in-kind support. Of that number, 1.2 million went to 110 different organizations here in Alaska. And so when this COVID-19 came up, it was very apparent that the first thing was going to be the impact on people through no fault of their own that lost their job and the need for food. So with that in mind, we have focused our attention on the food banks, and we made a commitment that we announced of over $500,000 to the food banks in the different communities in which we serve. So we're very pleased to have done that. So those are my remarks. With that, I'll pass it over to Alex.
Thank you, Val. So yeah, great overview, Val, and Steve, really appreciate your overview too. I think really highlights the Alaska supply chain. I want to thank the chamber, Bruce and Tasha, for having us on and for your time, and everybody else who's taken the time to join the meeting. So firstly, I'm Alex. I'm our general manager and vice president for Alaska. I work for TOTE. So we offer twice weekly service to Alaska, and with roll-on, roll-off service, ro-ro service, and really happy to announce this is our 45th year of doing so. So that's we're really excited about that. And really as the COVID scenario started unfolding first overseas, and then it really, kind of hit the Northwest, a little bit on the East Coast. The first thing we did was we stood up our ICS, our incident command system, communication system. And then we started understanding how quickly we could go to a work from home environment. And in reality, when we started doing that, and that was in February, I thought in no scenario we were going to go to this extreme work from home environment that we are today. And so we did that. And then again, within 2 weeks, we were all working from home for the most part from an administration standpoint. And then I think probably the second impact through COVID was for us who live in Anchorage, everybody was impacted by it, is a lot of the grocery shelves were empty, and there's a lot of focus on the Alaska supply chain. It's very recognized that we are all very reliant on ship service, and it's not just the ships, right? It's Steve and Val pointed it out. It's our relationship with the lower 48, the distribution centers down there, the trucking companies down there, our union partners, the stevedores, both in the lower 48 and Alaska. There's a lot of concern and questions on how reliant and resilient is the Alaska supply chain. So that's where we're, I guess we've been in this environment for, this is our 9th week. And, where we are today is, most of us are working from home. So my background is not actually the Port of Alaska right now. It's, if I turn it off, it'd be my house in Anchorage. And so, we're successfully working from home from an administration standpoint. Of course, as I said earlier, it's very important that we keep the folks that have to go to work to do the work, keep them safe. So we've kept, really tried to keep aligned and ahead of the CDC recommendations. So from a stevedoring standpoint, really trying to limit interactions with that group, taking into condition all the cleaning scenarios that take place in between our shifts, all the social distancing. I think there's one interesting point that all of our, we do, our safety briefings before a shift. All of those are done remotely now over the radio with our teams, which is great. And then we've shifted to a paperless environment. So there's obviously a lot of paperwork that goes to the ship, that goes between our company and our shippers. We talked about autos. So we've really shifted to a paperless environment up here. A lot of this stuff was in the works for the later part of this year, nothing with COVID in mind, but we've quickly pivoted to that kind of environment to keep everybody safe. And, I think the last thing was our crew members. So about a month ago, we put a halt on the interactions between our crew members and really the outside world, both from a paperwork standpoint and an engagement standpoint. And then we also put a 30-day pause on switching out crew members so we could kind of get our arms wrapped around the idea of quarantining before, and making sure we had a very safe environment for our crews. And so, we've done that, and that's gone very well. And so, I think, for us, I think the plan is worked. And I think the more complicated part is going to be how do we and when do we and why would we go back to an environment where people are spending more time together and spending time in the office, and we're working on those plans. But I'm really proud to say that our operations are running very smoothly. Steve pointed out, if you look at the Port of Alaska, it looks like nothing, it's not responding to these challenges, when in fact, a lot of us are. There's a lot of, we are now working in a lot of different ways, but our ships continue to call the market. And, we keep the two, really important things in mind. One, we've got to keep our people safe, and that is not just in a COVID environment. It's a busy environment down at the port. So our number one priority is keeping our team safe. And that looks different now than it did 9 weeks ago. And then also continuing to supply the Alaska market with critical freight services. And we've done that. So we're really proud about our work, and it's really it's the stevedores, it's the truckers, that have all continued to do the heavy lifting and keep this critical freight moving for the state. So I think that's all I have on the tote side. I will, I guess, probably turn it back over to Bruce or Tasha.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much for 3 great updates. And Alex, that was a good reminder. I think all of us as Anchorage residents and Alaskans are very grateful how you do keep your employees safe to where you can maintain deliveries and frequency of bringing goods to Alaska. So, I applaud all you folks for making that happen. So at this time, we've got plenty of time, it looks like, for questions. And so Tasha, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of manage the questions, and I'll do a closing at high noon. So, all right, Tasha, you want to take it?
Yeah. If you have questions, type it in the chat box here. I don't see any as of yet. Okay, here's one from John McCleary. How large is that next level of the delivery system, truckers and stevedores?
This is Val. I'm not quite clear on the question.
And John, if you want to unmute yourself and ask, feel free.
Well, I can take a quick crack at that, and maybe this will get the ball rolling. I won't answer it with respect to what is the difference in the volume of traffic that traverses the port on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday versus on a Sunday or a Tuesday. And as we sort of measure the volumes coming in through the main gate, we get very close to 1,600, between 1,600 and 2,000 truck trips through the main entry point on what we call a ship day, a Sunday or a Tuesday when the container ships are here. And that number drops into just a couple of hundred during a normal week. So if that's a real high level measure of volume, but there's a significant increase in the amount of traffic that we get on a ship day than there is in the normal, normal comings and goings around here. And it, goes to Alex's concern about, these truckers then become part of our environment. So there's an obligation to do something to protect their safety as well.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We have another question. Can you describe the progress being made on the Port of Alaska reconstruction and repair this summer? Also, has the coronavirus disrupted any discussions between the user group and the port in terms of next steps in the long-term reconstruction?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I can't talk to that because Bruce asked me not to. But if he changes his mind, I'm happy to.
Consider yourself, your hands are not tied any longer. You may answer the question.
Yeah, we kind of wanted to stay on topic, but since the question got asked, I'm really happy to answer it. This is the first summer, while there's been construction, at least preliminary construction activities going on for the last couple of summers. This is the first summer where in earnest, we're going to start in water construction on that new petroleum cement terminal that we've been talking about for a couple of years. Pacific Pile and Marine has begun mobilization. In fact, since last Monday, they have been driving pile to construct the temporary trestle, which they'll remove when the main construction part is over, but from which they will stage one of the cranes that will be used during construction of the new terminal. That started last week. In fact, if any of you watched the little concert that was shot down at the small boat launch, I was mentioning earlier that pile driving was going on during that concert, and I'll bet you nobody heard a thing going on in the background. So that was sort of an unintended science project with respect to just how noisy it was going to get around here as we started to drive pile. But the preliminary work is underway on constructing the part of the infrastructure that gets removed when the main construction's over. And soon to leave port in Seattle is going to be, the biggest barge-mounted crane anybody will have ever laid eyes on in the world. And it's coming up as part of the Pacific Pile and Marine equipment. And when that gets here, we can start in earnest the waterside construction. Now, when we're done this summer, what will be left in place when we button up for the winter will be the trestle and platform that make the base foundation for that new petroleum cement terminal. Next summer is when we add all the appurtenances to it, the hose tower, the hoses, the plumbing that ties into the existing valve yard, as well as the catwalks and the mooring dolphins and the fendering that goes on the front of the dock, so that by the time we reach the end of construction season 2021, we can cut the ribbon on a new facility, the first new facility added down here in a lot of years. So we're excited about that, but we are out of the starting blocks, and there is nothing that we anticipate that is going to slow that down. We've been working very closely with Pacific Pile and Marine, again, for workforce protection. They brought their own hygienist up here with them, who's monitoring the health of the workforce. And we've sort of set up, because of the state's quarantine rules, we've sort of set up a little, a trailer park, for lack of a better term, right there on the construction site to see us through that required quarantine period. And then when that's done, these guys should be able to interact in the community with the same amount of freedom that the rules that are being set by the municipality will allow them to, just like the rest of us.
Great, thank you. What impacts do you expect to demand at the port with cuts to tourism planned by the cruise industry?
Oh, that's for me too, huh? We've lost the entire cruise ship season. There were 14 port calls scheduled for this year. 2 of them were going to be the Queen Elizabeth, so that was with Cunard Lines, and the rest were with Holland America Princess. I believe the Mazdam was scheduled to be calling here. Now, what that does to our bottom line, that's about 210,000 in regular revenue. But then there's also a share of the state's head tax that amounts to between 30 and 40,000, depending upon how much of a volume we have in comparison to the rest of the state industry. So we would lose that as well. So it's about a $250,000 hit on the bottom line. Are we crippled? No. Does that sting? Oh yeah. And the way we intend to deal with that, at least as we look at what our expenses are, is to be a little bit more fastidious about managing our expenses this year, because we've lost quite a bit of wiggle room not having that revenue. I mean, it's not a deal breaker. It's not it's not problematic with respect to being able to operate the place, but there are some nice to have things that will get put on the on the Christmas card list or the Christmas gift list for next year, as opposed to being able to do it this year.
Let me just add, this is Val with Matson. I'll add a couple comments. So in terms of the passenger ship industry, I think the first impact that we saw is the reduction of cars being sent for rental car companies, because obviously they saw the impact to tourism and the passengers not being there, so they decreased their shipments of automobiles, which I think was one of the first impacts of COVID-19. Beyond the obvious, everyone rushed out to get toilet paper, so there's a big spike in demand for supplies and disinfectant.
Okay, and this question's for everyone. As it relates to COVID-19 conditions, what are your most significant risks to supply chain certainty?
From my perspective, it's keeping the people safe, and it's, you really can't distinguish on who's more important. I mean, there's a lot of folks that are involved in the supply chain, from even starting from the distribution centers down in the lower 48. Those places need to be kept safe, and the people there need to be kept safe, because they're the ones that build the loads and that eventually we all consume. So there's a whole chain of people that we really need to keep safe, and it's really hard. You can't even distinguish on who would be more important than the other. Certainly there are some categories of people that it's easier to keep safe. I would say, as an example, our administration employees, we can all work from home. It's pretty easy to manage that. And then if something happens, we're not going to impact each other. Our crew members, I think it's a very manageable scenario. But I think there are other scenarios where you've got a lot of people that get out in the communities, and that certainly, that creates some exposure. And so to me, it's about keeping the people who engage on the Alaska supply chain safe. And there's a lot of them. We all touched on them. It's our stevedores in lower 48 and up here. It's our truck drivers. It's the retail food handlers. There's a lot of people that put in a lot of work to make it all happen up here. So that's my perspective.
I'd add to Alex's comments. It's very clear that we're all in this together, and that's why it's important that we keep each other healthy and safe, from the people in the office to the people on the ships to the truck drivers, everybody in the supply chain, the people in the warehouses loading, unloading containers and stuffing the containers with the goods. So it's very apparent we're all in this together, and we're all going to get out of it together.
Yeah, and that's well said on both Alex and Val's part. I really have nothing to add to that. They've hit the nail on the head.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Type it in the chat box.
I'll jump in with a question here until others come in, but this is intended for Val and for Alex. But it's a shame we're going through this hunker down and seeing the effects on business from the pandemic. And of course, low oil prices have a economic impact here in Alaska, but aren't there some positive impacts as far as with Matson and TOTE and securing fuel futures?
So I'm happy to answer that. We actually did look at fuel futures, and it just doesn't make sense for us to do that. The low cost of fuel obviously is a benefit to the community from the standpoint of our lower fuel costs means lower fuel surcharges. And we operate with scrubbers, which is a low cost operation for fuel. But I will tell you, I think we'd all rather have much higher fuel costs and get the business going. I mean, the reason fuel costs have dropped so much is because of a huge drop in demand globally, to the extent that 2 weeks ago, the oil companies would pay you to take their oil, which is craziness.
Yeah, good comments, Val. And I agree. I mean, from a cost perspective and benefit to the Alaska market perspective, you look at the lower price of fuel and the lower fuel surcharge, and it seems like it's beneficial. But what it does to the Alaska economy, state revenues, jobs, it's certainly it's not beneficial. So I think we would prefer to see a higher a higher fuel perspective in that it helps the state of Alaska.
Oh, thank you. Good answers. So did we pick up any more questions there, Tasha?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll start closing out the program here, and then that might be, it's kind of like flipping the lights at last call. Maybe we'll get people moving to answer that question that's on the back of their mind. But one thing, I did send it out on the chat box, and we were very, very pleased to see Matson jump in at a time of need for us in securing major sponsors for the citywide cleanup. And Matson is our biggest sponsor of that event, and we just really appreciate it and look forward to a long working partnership with Matson. So thank you again so much for that.
Hey, Bruce.
Yes.
This is Val. I did see a question on here from Forrest Dunbar regarding progress made between the port and the port users group. And I think I can answer that question.
Very good.
If you'd like.
Yes.
So we are continuing to meet, Matson with the port. As I know, TOTE is meeting with the port, so those meetings are continuing. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow with the port, continuing. In terms of the port users group, we continue to meet, and we know we owe the municipality an answer on their proposed ordinance. We did get detained by the refocus on COVID-19 and priority, but I think we're close to getting our response finalized this week to get it back to the Muni. I don't know if Alex wants to add anything to that.
No, I think Val hit it on the head there. There's direct conversations we have with the port, and certainly the Port of Alaska user group continues to meet, working on, there's an ordinance setting up a committee, and so working on that. And I'm very hopeful that we can get everything aligned and make sure we continue to make progress after the PCT, as we're entering some really positive phases there.
Okay, and Forrest says thank you for the answers from Val and Alex. So
You're welcome.
Time filler till more questions come in. At this time, though, I want to make sure that our members and participants here are aware of next Monday's virtual Make It Monday Forum, and it's going to be a program that'll showcase summer of 2020 municipal construction projects and overall work of PM&E, so that members can plan and prepare for the summer construction season and know what's happening across Anchorage. Our speakers will be Diana Rotkus, Central Region Deputy Director of the Alaska DOT and Public Facilities, and Kent Kohlhaas, Director of Project Management and Engineering. And again, we encourage people, even on the virtual Make It Monday forums, we appreciate you registering early. And I'm happy to see we had 49 participants in today's call as well, and that's great. So I'll turn it back over just in case Steve or Val or Alex want to make some closing comments. We have a couple minutes, so we'll start with you, Steve.
Well, no, just to say thanks very much for the opportunity getting the three of us together. I appreciate the chance to give a little bit of an update on how things are going down here. It's a challenge for us to keep people reassured that there's a lot of hardworking people who are trying to keep this supply chain moving, and worrying about where stuff is going to come from the last of everybody's worries in these tough times. And these guys are doing some incredible work, and I try every day to make the port part of the solution and certainly not part of their problem.
Very good. Thank you. Val?
Yeah, so one, thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak. The other thing I'd add, and Steve talked about communication, but the other communication that's going on is the Maritime Administration has set up a weekly call with the industry. So that's throughout Alaska, throughout the lower 48. And 2 weeks ago, they described a tremendous effort being done by the University of Washington and another firm called Discovery to enable the 10,000 fishermen to come to Alaska to fish. And I think I was very impressed with the processes they had set up for testing these fishermen at over a 2-week cycle from the beginning until the end, and monitoring them, which I think is speaks to the great effort of everybody trying to work through the COVID-19 crisis and keep the fisheries going and keep that critical part of our economy going. So I think, as I had said earlier, we're all in this together. We'll get out of it together, and that's a good example of the work being done by lots of people to keep our state moving. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, I'll close out with thank you so much for having us, and it's great to get up here with Steve and Val and represent the industry. And certainly, I'm very proud to be a part of the industry, as Val just mentioned, with being a part of MARAD. And there's certainly we understand our responsibility and what we do for the state, and this industry has responded very, very well. We're working together on the response, and so that's, I'm proud to be a part of that. And so thank you so much for having us, and look forward to the next time.
Very good. Thank you. And to all three of you, keep up the good work. And Jen, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us more about Blitz Promotions. I'm sure you're going to get some interest and some calls from the group that heard your presentation. So again, thanks for making time to join us and educating our membership today. So with that, again, a big thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you next week, and you folks have a fabulous week. Thanks again for joining the Anchorage Chamber.
Thanks, Bruce. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.